The thing that I look back most on is like value your time more and understand that like hospitality extends to yourself. And it is an extension of something that a friend of mine used to say that an old Sama told him, which was, hospitality extends beyond the guest to your coworkers. But I think you also have to pay attention to yourself.
Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and if this is your first time tuning in, I've worked in the restaurant, hospitality, and bar world for the last 20 years, and I go around finding people who have cool, interesting, fun, and exciting things to talk about that touch on that world. On that note, today we are talking to a gentleman by the name of Chris Morris. Chris is the former single malt ambassador for Brown-Forman, and he is a experienced and celebrated bartender. We talk about meeting people where they are. We talk about longevity and kindness to yourself in this business. He says names of scotches, a few of which I would never even have dared to attempt the pronunciation on air, and so much more. So, without any further ado, here's Chris Morris. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. Actually, I think that's kind of a cool place to start if you're down to.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how you got the job, and so you were single malt ambassador. Is that the term?
Yeah, I think on my business card it said like single malt whiskey consultant or something like that.
So how does one get that job?
Being in the right place at the right time and being a giant nerd. No, I was running a restaurant called Hunky Dory, which is like this sort of British, I know it's not cool to say, or maybe it's cool to say now, but it was essentially a gastropub when like that was a dirty word. I don't know if you remember that part of like the industry flux. I had some guys coming in and they were always drinking Jack Daniel's single barrel proof old fashions. That's all they would drink.
Very niche order. Yeah.
Very, very niche order. And I think they asked me about Woodford one time. So it doesn't take long to figure out who these guys are. And they're sitting at the bar one day. I was like, oh, you guys work for Brown-Forman? They're like, yeah, how'd you know? I was like, well, your drink order kind of gives it away. And
you have a price and sensitivity about certain liqueurs and not others.
Yeah, and I was like, I actually just got back from one of your distilleries like a month ago, and they're like, which one? Was it Jack or was it Woodford? No, it was Ben Riach. And this is right after Brown-Forman had purchased the single malt profile, and they're like, huh, we're just a bunch of dumb bourbon guys. You probably know a lot more about this than we do. And they're like, I was like, well, I mean, I do kind of run a bar that kind of focuses on Scotch. And they're like, hey, would you mind like coming over to the house and like teaching us about Scotch? They're like, well, we'll pay for your time. We'll give you some bottles. I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll always drink, whiskey with just about anybody. So I went over to their house, and they literally went around Houston, bought every damn bottle they could. Like, out of production 21 years. If it was from any of the 3 distilleries, they bought it. And so I went over, and they're like, yeah, so this one says peated. What does that mean? And I'm like, oh, boy.
All right, page 1. Let's go.
I have guys that are like literal state managers in the bourbon space that don't know a damn thing about Scotch. So I just hang out and just talk them through kind of everything and like through their distilleries for like 2 or 3 hours, and they're like, awesome. So here's this bottle, here's my personal barrel of Makers, here's a bottle of birthday bourbon, appreciate you. And they sent me on my way, and I was like, sweet. Then a few years later, I was coming back from Tails. I was actually on I-10 driving back from New Orleans, and one of the guys that was at that tasting calls me. He's like, hey, I got a single malt ambassador positionship opening, and you are the list. Like, you're literally the guy that I want. Are you interested? I was like, well, yeah. Like, let's see where this goes. And then he's like, great, I'll get to set you up on a call with my boss. And this dude did all the legwork for me. My second interview was all of like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It was basically like, I hopped on. This guy is like, oh, hey, you're Chris, nice to meet you. I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, so-and-so says really good things about you. The position starts at this, but he said you were looking for a little bit more, so, like, how does this sound? And I'm like, yeah, no, it's in my range. He was like, great, I'll send all the paperwork over. And then, 2 months later, they torpedoed the position, and I just traveled I mostly sat at home and then went into town and bought all my friends whiskey for 6 months. It's good times.
Yeah. So, when you got this job, were you still running the restaurant, or is this like a transition out of that?
This was a brief transition out of the restaurant life. Mm-hmm. And then immediately went right back into it.
Yes. Okay. So it's just a little exit. I feel like that is very Brown-Forman. Do you know Eric Tukoski?
I think so.
Jack Daniels guy? Yeah. He has almost the exact same story where a bunch of Brown-Forman guys come in, say, "Hey, you like Jack? We have a presentation. Do you think you could do a presentation for some people?" It's like, sure. It's very much trial by fire and see who sticks kind of thing.
Yeah. The trial by fire part was once they actually hired me and all the paperwork was done, they get all the local guys together, including the Jack rep, who's everything you want him to be. He's Texan as hell, lives out in the suburbs, always told us about his local pub. He really loved their old fashioned because they made it with Saint Germain and muddled cranberry, which I was like, all right, yeah, it's fine. Big handlebar mustache, always had to sit facing the door in case, someone tried to rob the restaurant. He had his gun ready. That's not a stereotype, that's real.
I'm from Texas. Yeah. It is real.
Yeah, that's 100%. But great dude, heart of gold. He sits down and he goes, "Word on the street is you don't like Jack Daniels." I was like, well, I'm more of a single malt guy. Jack's a little kind of light for me. He's just not kind of a profile that I enjoy. But, I respect his place in the market. It's a historic brand. He goes, "Good, just as long as you understand who's paying your paycheck."
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Trust me, Glenn Glassa is not paying me. Uncle Jack is paying me. I understand. It's going to be fine.
Yep. Man, I can only imagine. Because Brown-Forman has so many different products, but Jack is such a beast. I think it's something like 1 in 6 bottles of whiskey sold is Jack Daniels. That's probably like an inflated thing, but like them
it's
and Johnny Walker,
are
like the two juggernauts there.
Yeah, this guy had no fear. He told me a story. He was in a bar one time. I don't know, remember if they were Army or Marine, but they were in their camos, their fatigues, and walk up and he hears them order Crown, and he's just sitting there. Huh, that's funny. I ain't never seen two boys in uniform that hate America. Whip around like, what the hell did you just say? And he's like, well, I mean, I don't mean to be listening to him, but I just couldn't help but, over here you order a Canadian whiskey that's owned by a bunch of Brits, and that just doesn't seem befitting of a man in uniform to me. Well, what should we be drinking? He's like, well, what about good old Jack Daniels, made right here in Lynchburg, Tennessee? The most seamless shit.
And converting the drinkers 2 at a time. That's some balls right there. How did you get into single malts? Was it necessity or love?
It was mostly love. It just always kind of just fascinated me how many different flavors you could pull out of, a single ingredient. American whiskey, we get to play a lot more with mash bill. You can make it sweeter with wheat. You can make it big and bold and spicy with rye. Like single malt, like it's barley, man. It is what it is. And it's so much more dependent on the still itself and the water and like sort of there's a romance and like the lack of technology behind it that like I think is really really kind of interesting. Like it's basic distillation. It's a single ingredient going through a pot still, collect it on the other side, do it again, put it in a barrel and hope. And so it's just always like a profile that I enjoyed a little bit more. Bourbon and rye for me were better for cocktail ingredients outside of like the highest end. Yeah, it's just something that, I took an interest in and, got to know and love and got to do it for a living for 9 months.
Okay, yeah. The thing that always holds me back, I think, with Scotch in particular, is the pronunciation aspect of it. And I've already heard you say a couple that I'm like, damn, I would not have said that on the record. I always would gravitate towards the easier ones that you see, and I think a lot of the ones you see in the mass market are easier to pronounce is they kind of thought about that,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I tend to have a bit of a penchant for the absurd, so of course 2 of my favorite distilleries are 2 of the hardest ones to say.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and I struggle to get people to order Lefroy because they're like, I don't know, the couple of consonants at the end there, I'm not sure whether or not to pronounce it, a couple of weird vowels. Yeah.
I think it has to do a lot more with tasting like a burning children's ward, but
yeah, so that's good. If you were trying to get someone who's starting off this journey into the world of single malts, what would you start introducing them to?
Well, I find out what they drink first.
Okay.
I think anything in this profession, whether you're selling beer, whether you're selling whiskey, whether you're selling gin, whether you're selling wine, you find out where they are and then you introduce them based on that. And that's something that I remember talking with a friend of mine who was really into whiskey, and he'd really gotten into the Scotch, and told me, he's like, I drink nothing but cask strength sherry bombs. And nothing else has flavor. And I'm like, it does. And I'm going to challenge you now that I'm going to bring you a 12-year-old Highland, or a 12-year-old Lowland whiskey next week, and you're going to appreciate it more than you ever have. And what I find is that when someone is passionate about something, does not necessarily make them the best source of information or education or instruction. Because when you're passionate, you tend to be on the nerdy side. I think you just gave me a really great example. You're I can't, get people to drink Lefroy. I'm like, well, if they're not Scotch drinkers, I'd never try and do that. It's patently absurd. But people who are really into Scotch, the me's and you's of the world, yeah, we're going to drink Lefroy and Lagavulin and Ardbeg, and give me the hardest to pronounce weird release that Ardbeg did, or just pour me Dark Cove because delicious. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Guys who are really into beer, they're gonna be fucking Hop Monster 175 million IBU IPAs,
double IPA, arrogant bastard,
or it's Tuesday morning, let's drink a 14% bourbon barrel, crazy stout. And it's well, yes, let's do all of those things. But for your buddy Jim next door that likes Bud Light, this is not going to work. He's going to think that all craft beer is bullshit and is going to go right back to his habits. As opposed to if you just pour him a locally made lager, which, by the way, is what all the people who make all these big absurd beers drink on their own time. And so, I find out where somebody's at, right? If there's somebody who's had some craft beer and, maybe had, a Kolsch, or they, went to Germany, enjoyed those beers, then you can, take them and show them something like that. So if I have somebody who's a bourbon drinker, I find out, if they've been, if they're a Makers fan, that's going to be different than Woodford or Buffalo Trace. I think is a better example. One's going to have a little bit sweeter of a palate, one's going to be a little bit more dry, have a little bit more rye to it. So somebody that's sweeter, I'm going to show them a sherry cask, maybe Balvenie 12, the double wood. Somebody that drinks a little bit spicier thing, I might take them, maybe a Glenfiddich 12. Kind of thing, a little bit more kind of neutral and a little bit grassier kind of flavors. So for me, people, sharing this is all about finding the best entry point, and you do that by meeting people where they're at, as opposed to just a universal answer. Because I think it's really easy to say oh yeah, Balvenie 14 Caribbean cask, it's sweet, it's juicy, it's everything you want. It's not intimidating, but that's not. It'll work for most people. It won't work for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think when we're introducing things, we're really hyped to get people to the level that we're at, and we kind of forget the journey that we had to go on and how really cool it kind of was discovering things along the way. So I like to foster having people discover, because just sitting down and then getting to drink the best stuff in the world, it's kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. As you were talking too, I was thinking about another passion of mine lately, and I've talked to a lot of people in the tequila space. It's very akin to mezcal versus tequila, and I think there's a reason tequila took off first. It's more approachable. It's easier to get into for the layman. And I mean, mezcal is having its heyday, and it's growing by 4,000% every year, but that's from 3 to 6 to 9, it started off pretty small because, it's one of those things where you either love it or you gotta kind of get gently introduced to it, because it can have those overwhelming flavors as well. Sorry to interrupt. We will get right back to Chris and Andrew, but I did want to take a moment and ask, if you have not had a chance to rate this show, it would mean the world to me, and it really does help us grow. So thank you for listening, and without any further ado, here's Chris and Andrew.
Exactly. I mean, I remember, I've been blessed to be doing this long enough, and I feel like we're very much in kind of the second golden age of bartending, I would say, over probably the last 30 years. And I remember when Vita first came to Texas.
Mind-blowing. Yes.
Ron
that was Cooper, it. What?
If you want a mezcal cocktail, you have Vita, and if you want an expensive one, you have some other Del Maguey products. That was it. The selection on a liquor store shelf was this. They were all Del Maguey. And then 5 years after that, every one of my friends was a part-time mezcal ambassador, who anytime you put their drinks on the menu, they were the only ones that came in and drank them. But yeah, it's very much I've I've known people that were big agave enthusiasts, and yeah, if you take somebody that, you know, they drink Jose Cuervo, and you're like, try this Pachuga, it's not going to get the design.
No matter how good it is, yeah, exactly.
Outside of like, you know, very, you know, think about how many people you know pour their first shot of Fernet. You know, like, sure, it's a great way to figure out if somebody's a sociopath or if they're on an FBI watch list. But for the average consumer, it's going to take you a little bit to get there. You gotta warm people up to the experience.
For someone who is getting into the world of single malts, I'm just curious, what do you think of the blended scotches in the space? Are there any that you'd recommend, or do you pretty much stay single malt?
I don't stay anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love single malt. I think those tend to be the ones that get the most focus, but I've had fantastic single grain whiskeys. I've had great, you know, blends out there. It just depends on what I'm trying to do with it, you know? Like, people don't want to hear it, but like Dewar's 12 makes a better highball than Macallan 12. Like, you know, it's just objective fact. It is what it is. And as much as that doesn't actually exist. But yeah, like for cocktail purposes, the problem with Scotch obviously like starts to get slightly price prohibitive. You know, you can go from a well whiskey into something better, and you go up to like $30. Like $30 barely gets you a Scotch that like deserves to be in a glass, you know. But I think for like most cocktail purposes, like Monkey Shoulder basically does like the perfect impersonation.
They do a great job. Yeah.
You know, I come from the wine world, so you have like the sense of terroir, and you're like, yeah, like this tastes like a Speyside whiskey because that's literally all it is. It's blended malt. But as far as like just like regular blended whiskeys, like there's not a damn thing wrong with Famous Grouse. There's just not. It's the best-selling Scotch. You know, it's the Jack Daniels of Scotland. It's the best-selling Scotch in Scotland. So, like, if it's good enough for them, I think it's probably good enough for you.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, too, that, you know, you got to start with the end in mind. Like, why would you want to make a cocktail with, like, 18-year-old Macallan? Just, you know, just, like, drink that on the rocks or drink that neat. Yeah.
I think use case, we don't think about enough. We like to think about everything in a vacuum in this industry. I had my mind blown one time. I was at the Bacardi distillery. I had qualified for Nationals of Legacy, and I was talking with one of their distillers, and we were talking about just Bacardi Carta Blanca, just the white label that we all know. And he's like, we make mojitos and daiquiris. Like, we don't drink this on its own. That's not a thing. That's not why we make it. And I've had so many people that are just like, oh, like, you know, Bacardi is such shit. I'm like, yeah, if you just taste Bacardi White and a Glencairn, sure. It's not going to blow your socks off. It was also not intended for you to drink it that way. So, like, if you want to taste, like, $15 white rums, make a bunch of daiquiris, make a bunch of mojitos. This is why this product exists. And I think that's so important that we lose sight of why is this thing here, as opposed to, you know, Bacardi 8 is better than, you know, Bacardi White. You're like, well, depends what you're going to do with it.
Yeah. And then, like, that actually opens up a large area for you to respect a lot of mixers, too. Because, like, who in their off time is drinking peach schnapps, you know, or, like, something like that? But I've had a lot of cocktails that have it, like, a fourth or an eighth of an ounce, and it works well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, you're not going to be slamming shots of peach schnapps.
Hopefully.
Another thing that, I mean, I've spent years of my life going on this exact same rant, but like one of the worst cocktails I've ever tasted was the same one that every single bar was serving in, like, what are we gonna call it? Let's call it 2014, which is the old Overholt base label Manhattan with Carpano Antica as the vermouth. What the fuck were we doing? Like, that is a very light rye whiskey with the heaviest, most vanilla bomb vermouth that you can make. Like, Antica is fantastic, but you have to have body to make that make sense, because otherwise you're not
the product.
Like Rittenhouse with Antica, great, because it's got, you know, 100 proof. It stands up to it. It's got body. Overholt doesn't. And like we just think like it's a Manhattan. It's whatever vermouth I want to use, whatever rye I want to use, and we don't actually think of the individual components and the fact that one might taste different from another.
Or you end up with a glass of Antica with a little whiff of whiskey in the background as an accent.
And anytime anyone's pressed me on that, I ask them how many ingredients are there in a Manhattan, which I'm sure you're probably going to tell me 3, right? We know this. It's whiskey, it's vermouth, it's bitters. Or I'm going to tell you it's probably closer to 100, because you have every single botanical in the bitters that you choose, every single aromatizing element in the vermouth that you choose, the base wine of the vermouth that you use, the water that's used to produce all of these things. And they can disrupt themselves in the process. So one thing that, if you have a wheated whiskey at a certain amount of alcohol, you might want a different vermouth. And that's not to say one is better than the other. It's just saying, like, you can control all of these elements to make a more harmonious experience. Are we going to do that on a micro level for general service? No. But when you're setting out to, like, make the best cocktail that you can, it's something to consider, right? It's Mr. Potato Head, sure, but, like, every one of those pieces is a bunch of microplastics put together. Our microplastics are just botanical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing about the Manhattan is it's a simple cocktail, but the danger there is there's nowhere to hide. So if one element's off, you got like 33% of the cocktail doesn't work, if not more. Yeah. No, and you're right. Like, it is really useful when it comes to making cocktails to have the Mr. Potato Head idea, but like, substituting in mojito the rum for like a really high proof rye heavy whiskey, like that's going to be just a different experience. You got to have to adapt. Yeah. The straight 1-to-1 substitution always is fraught with some unforeseen dangers. I've made plenty of bad cocktail. I do think it'd be worthwhile to touch on, how did you learn to make cocktails?
It was proximity and necessity.
Okay.
So my background is as a sommelier. I got into hospitality, found fine dining, and my dad always told me if somebody does the same job that you do and they make more money than you do, you should probably figure out what they do that you don't. It doesn't take much time on a steakhouse floor to figure out who's making the most money. They're the ones with the wine on the table.
The guys slinging the bottles, yeah.
Yeah. The guys slinging the Silver Oak and the Jordan and the Camus are making a whole lot of money than me with, my by the glass pours. And then it doesn't take you long to figure out that if you want to sell wine, you kind of got to learn something about wine. So started learning, and eventually I was working at a job at a new restaurant that had just opened. It was the floor somm in their like tasting menu only restaurant. And then, as restaurant operators do, decide they want to save some money. Like, they're basically going to cut my position and have just a beverage director for both outlets. They're not going to have like a dedicated somm.
It is always the first
right.
position to go, yes.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, well, that's good. And to their credit, like, they offered to let me just stay on as like a service captain, and I'm like, which paid the exact same, but I'm like, I don't know, I kind of like what I'm doing. Yeah, I think I'm good. And, at that time, there were only like, I don't know, 10 or 15 like professional somms in Houston. Like, there weren't very many. Half of them were just glorified AGMs, which still hasn't changed much, quite frankly. But I was like, all right, I'm going to find something else to do. I was, I couldn't really move at the time. I didn't have the money. I was dating a new girl who luckily I wound up marrying, so wound up being a good decision in the long run. But we had done like some different spirits seminars. The bar in our main outlet was some OG guys from Anvil, which is kind of like Houston's Milk and Honey, like Violet Hour, like OG. Anyone you meet in the craft cocktail space and you tell them you're from Houston, are going to ask you if you know Anvil. They're literally one of the best bars that there is. They were the ones. And so we had a bunch of their OG guys. So they're in there mixing up, Remember the Mains, and stuff like that. They were doing classic punches for happy hour. I mean, we had a wine pairing as well as like a mixed spirit / cocktail pairing with what we were doing. So it picked up enough proximity knowledge. Then I had a friend of a friend who was opening a craft cocktail bar. He was an old nightclub owner that I think was just an ecstasy ring in the end, but that's neither here nor there.
That's next week's podcast. Yes.
Yeah, the 2000s were a magical time, man. Yeah, so he was opening a bar and didn't know what he was doing, and I'm like, well, hell, I know what a Negroni is, and I can make an old fashioned. So he hired me to run his bar, and that's how I got into spirits.
That is wild.
And I opened that bar, and my well whiskey was Weller 12. I was pouring $10 Weller 12 old fashions in 2013 or whatever.
Heck yeah, that is one hell of a well.
And we were doing it on pillow ice too. No fancy ice. No, Weller in a glass, boy.
Heck yeah. No, that's super cool. I think what I really like about that, it sounds like me and you had the same journey, just opposite. So I started with the mixology route, just in a like craft, fresh juice, very like high quality classic cocktail bar back, of course, not doing anything for a long time. But then I realized that the people in the restaurant that I was making the drinks for, there was this one guy, Nick's Available, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name. It's been like 15 years, but remember him just slinging bottles. And like I'm over here in the bar sweating, like muddling fruit. And I'm just seeing him just like night after night, just grab the bottle, go. And like, man, that's all you need for a party of 4. And just like, maybe I'm doing this wrong. There was a guy in town giving a free wine class. Turns out he was studying for his advanced, and he was just like helping people pass the intro in the Court of Master Psalms. I'm like, yeah, I could go to a free wine class. Might as well. He just used it as like a refresher for him. But yeah, 10 years later, like still going that route. But I feel like everyone starts with one thing that they're really obsessed with. I just thought the bar was cool. I thought the people that worked in the bar were cool.
They were the coolest. They were the coolest people.
Yeah.
My first job in this industry was Olive Garden, and we had a guy that worked behind the bar named Hank, and Hank was just the fucking man. And not only because I had to like walk up and hand him cash every night,
and he didn't even seem to care.
Automatically, there's a power dynamic of like, these guys are cool because I literally pay them. There was no automatic tip out. It was, you took what you had in your pocket, you handed over your percent.
Yeah.
But like, I would just watch that dude just control the room, and like, I was like, this is the coolest dude I've ever seen. You know, it took me many years to like actually get behind the bar from there. But yeah, it was kind of the same thing. It was just like, bartenders are fucking cool.
Yeah. No, and I never excelled at the whole controlling the crowd. I mean, I got better. You either improve or die. But I quickly realized that if I studied and I knew enough about cocktails, and I was like, if I could master just that aspect, like people would respect that, you know, because, you know, I saw guys who like didn't know half the drinks, or like whose, you know, just like technique sucked, but they'd walk behind the bar, like smile, and like the bar would fill up, and it's like, okay, yeah, you know, I may not be able to do that, but I can make a quick, good cocktail, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it takes all those different types for a bar to be successful. So like Bobby Hugel from Anvil, he was talking one time about how he hires. And he almost never hires the best available bartender, like on spec. He hires what is the personality fit that fills a role in the bar that he needs right now. So if like he has somebody that is just like a service well monster that's leaving, he wants to hire somebody that he sees can really be a heads down, get it going. If he's losing like the big star personality, he needs to fill that role. And he doesn't care how many competitions you've won or what you've accomplished. He's hiring a spot, you know, and I've worked with, you know, all types over the years. So like I tend to be more of like the really nerdy, really focused. Like if somebody asks you a question that you don't know, you come and get me, and like go back to working the rest of the bar. And so I could kind of specialize in that, and then leave like the running the room and the big energy to some other people because they were just better at it. Like I'm naturally kind of introverted. And so like, but like that's not saying that there's you know a right or wrong way. You know, we're at the end of the day we're still taking that pool, we're chopping it equal, and we respect where each other's like skills lie in that sort of flow.
That's so funny too. As you're talking through that, I'm thinking through people I've worked with. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, and like, man, there's this one girl I worked with, Leahi, and you know, she could hold her own behind the bar. She was awesome, but dude, you know, I bartended with her just a couple times at this one local bar, and it was like right as she was about to have her kid. Bar was not big, we were not that busy, and it was like one of the best days I ever made. Like she was a personality, you know, like everyone knew this was one of her last shifts before she was leaving to have the kid, like, and like I like almost felt guilty splitting that money with her because I was like, I mean I was working hard too, but like, dude, you brought in all the but it's just like, yeah. And then I've worked with people that's like, I don't want to talk to anyone, heads down, I'm well guy, like it's like love those guys all day. It's funny, yeah, you kind of find your place, and you don't see the people like switching that often, or if they do, they're not too happy about it too. Okay, the nerdy guy, you're the Chris Milligan I worked with. I like that. Cool. If you could go back and, you know, talk to yourself when you were getting into this space, you're at Olive Garden, and you're like, hey, young Chris, do this and avoid that. What advice would you have for yourself starting out?
The thing that I look back most on is like value your time more and understand that like hospitality extends to yourself.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an extension of something that a friend of mine used to say that an old Psalm had told him, which was, you know, hospitality extends beyond the guest to your coworkers. But I think you also have to pay attention to to yourself, right? Like I've had times where I was scheduled to be off at 10, but I left at 11:30 because just the right regular came in at the right time, and now I'm gonna have a conversation with them, and then I saw these people, and I gotta go like spend 30 minutes with them, and it's like, no, like you could have just like been like, oh hey guys, good to see you, I'm on my way out, they're going to be fine, trust in the people that work there, and enjoy an hour doing what you want to do. So I think and I don't think it was a mistake, but I think I've sacrificed a lot of time outside of what like was really necessary, and not taking care of myself. So I would definitely do that, and then tell myself to get better shoes.
Yeah, the shoes thing will kill you.
I mean, just the like I am somebody that very much paid attention to ergonomics and like how the body moves, and I was I still see people that do what I call the claw grip, and I'm like, how the fuck do you do this? They'll have their mixing glass. Don't ask me why I have all of this just on my work desk, and they'll do this one, and I'm like, the pain on the wrist once you get to here, as opposed to just the nice simple like turn.
Yeah.
And I learned all of this, and I lived by all of this, and I always like shook in front of me and shook away from my ears so I didn't damage my hearing, and still, like after 10 years in the industry, like my body was just like torn.
Yeah.
I'd gone back to bartending for a while at a restaurant, and like so glad I did. I started off as a lead server there, got behind the bar, became their lead bartender. 6 months later, we had one of the first Michelin stars in Texas. So like that was a like incredibly cool part of being there. But I went to him 6 months before I left and was like, hey guys, I have 6 months of bartending left. And I was like, busy shift, the elbow takes 2 or 3 days. Doesn't fully heal. Whoever designed this bar is an absolute moron. This is as inefficient as I've ever seen.
Best case, terrorist.
Yeah. I mean, best case was like you hired Stevie Wonder, quite frankly. But yeah, it was just terrible, and like just the wear on the body and my elbow just never healed. So like I knew 6 months ahead of time I was like, I am done bartending full time. And they were like, all right, like, what do you see yourself doing? I was like, I'm fine to go back on the floor, but like, I was already like helping out their SOM team, so I'm like, SOM position would be great. I'm down to move into management, even though it's the big gross M word, with the big gross S, as your payment. I'm like, what do you mean I don't make tips? That's bullshit. I don't want it. I don't want it anymore.
Someone who made that transition, yes, I know, yeah.
Yeah, and then and then I've made it several times since then, and like I'm at a point where like I'm doing the best I ever have in my career. So like, it's fine. It's scary, but mostly because I did it outside of restaurants.
Yeah, there is a really sad thing in that transition. I didn't realize the thing I would miss. All these, now that I have a little bit more work ethic and I have a little bit better ability to plan, grown up a little bit, found religion, all that jazz. All these competitions that I now like see come on, I look at the rules just to see, and they all are like, have to be working bartender. I'm like, shit. I didn't know that would be the thing that I missed most. 8 years in. But there are the few that you can still enter, but 9 times out of 10 you go to the fine print and it's like, have to be working as a bartender. It's like, so it is what it is. But the big S word, salary is not a bad thing.
Yeah. I get to kind of double dip. I'm on salary plus commission now, so.
There you go. That's the adult speak for tips, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool.
But in this case, a fixed percent. I never get screwed.
There you go. Yeah. There it is. What do you got coming up? Any big projects? Anything exciting on the horizon?
No, I always joke that I'm sunsetting out, and at any given point, I'm 2 weeks from grabbing these banjos back here, taking my wife and dogs, buying a cabin in Maine, and disappearing from existence, which every year gets more appealing.
Well, I guess
I got out of the full-time restaurant grind last year, moved into the plush world of private country clubs.
Okay.
And the most I've worked in a week has been 44 hours, which used to be Monday through Wednesday.
Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah. If anyone was listening to this and wanted to see if they could find somewhere that has been influenced by your style and your knowledge, where should someone go? The
two best examples probably, and I don't know how much he credits me as influence, but he used to use one of my signature techniques all the time. So they want to go to Bar Zolo in Houston. Just opened. One of my favorite bartenders, Angel Hernandez, and one of my absolute favorite chefs, Javi Becerra, who has a like Michelin pedigree, giant nerd. Angel like really dove deep and went back to Mexico City and did a bunch of stages. So they came back and wanted to open like a Mexico City style cocktail bar in Houston.
Oh, that's sick. Yeah.
Yeah, and like incredibly talented guys. So love what they do. Also, I like some guys that have worked for me work at like Easy's Cocktail or Easy's Liquor Lounge up in the Heights in Houston, but like they don't take any influence from me. Like that's a fancy dive bar. Like sure, I taught one of them how to dress himself and drink Campari, but like dude had like the most natural bartender charisma I've ever seen. So like.
Go do a shot of Campari with him. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's so much that, like, people that I've influenced have just, like, kind of gone on and done their own things. And, like, I love that. I don't want people to just be mini versions of me. I want them to, like, take the lessons that I teach them and turn it into their own thing and find their own success.
I guess.
So, like, I've got plenty of people that have worked with me, but, like, have I influenced them? Maybe. Are they taking and, like, pouring drinks of mine 3 states away? No. I mean... I was once responsible for the Ray Charles game going to Philadelphia, but like that's not real. I mean, it's real. But
I'm guessing if you're at home and you want to find out more about Chris, maybe pop open a couple bottles of single malt. It's probably the best way to touch base.
Particularly Bunnahabhain and Krugelliki.
Oh yeah. Little Bunnahabhain.
I love the difficult ones.
Oh yeah. Well, Chris, I messed up our booking, got you confused. My AirPods didn't work. The technical issues. I want to just from the bottom of my heart thank you for putting up with what is by far my worst guest interaction experience. You are the most gracious guest I've had on the podcast so far, and that's saying a lot. I've had some nice people, so
the technology.
Yes, and then if you're listening at home, my advice to all of you out there, if it doesn't work, turn it off, turn it back on. Do that a couple times. It usually helps.
Yeah, and if you do that 5 times, it doesn't help, hit it with a hammer and then see.
There you go. Chris, I don't want to take up your whole day. Thank you for coming on. Serves you right. It was a real pleasure getting to talk to you.
Trust me, I'm getting off of here and negotiating a car deal, so you are keeping me sane.
This was a good interlude. Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening. And stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.